Peace and love, everybody. Welcome to All of Us are None, Wisconsin, our fourth edition of our multi-part series, Justice Check-In. Today is our policing edition. So, this is a very good panel, and we get as much out of it as possible. We have elected officials impacted. We're getting some of those people as well when we get into panel discussion. A couple of hot things. It is 3 parts to this. We're going to have a directly impacted panel, and we're going to have an official panel interface. And at the conclusion of that interface, we're going to have room for the community to speak their piece and to also interface with both directly impacted panel as well as elected officials. That makes sense, everybody? The pilot had problems and no Zoom and reality is coming. We appreciate your patience. Things introduce our chief ambassador, Brother Sean Vaughn.
Thank you. Once again, we'd like to thank everyone for attending another All of Us Done event. We do ask that when individuals come up to speak, that we keep things in a respectful manner. Make sure that we watch our language and respect each other. We ask that the doors don't be used at this time. We ask that everyone also stay cell phones also. Make sure we don't have any interruptions. And at this time, I would like to moderate our first one. Campaign for Expo. I do apologize, Peggy. You do a lot of things. It's Peggy West, and also our other president of All of Us None, Khalif. I would like to, at this time, we would like to get our pledge in. I'm sorry. The determination pledge, and that will be done by our Vice President. I'll give her a round of applause, please.
Good afternoon, honored guests, elected officials, and everyone. Welcome to our 4th edition of our panel. I am Sister Ma'ati Bey, Vice President of All of Us or None, and I'm very honored to be here. Gratitude. Determination of All of Us or None, we pledge to demand the right to speak in our own voice, with respect, and not allow differences to divide us, to accept responsibility for any acts that may have caused harm to our families, our communities, and ourselves, to fight off discrimination, help build the economic stability of formerly incarcerated people, to claim and take care of our own children and our families, to support community struggles, to stop using prisons as the answer to social problems, to play an active role in making our community for everyone. I also have an announcement. We are conducting a swag campaign, and in our swag campaign, we have t-shirts, masks, we also invite you to we accept donations for our All of Us $9 million campaign. Thank you so much. I yield the floor again to my esteemed colleague.
Thank you, sister. At this time, we are going to bring forth our moderators, Khalif and Peggy. Give them a round of applause, please.
Thank you, everybody. So we're going to start off with introducing our panelists. We're going to start with elected officials. We have Brother Jeff Altenberg, attorney. Yeah. Jeff, want to introduce yourself to? He's on.
I really can't hear anything. This is Jeff Altenberg from the DA's office. Good afternoon.
You can't hear me?
No, your mic is really, really cutting out.
Can you hear us now, Brother Jeff?
That is certainly better. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, thank you. Can you introduce yourself to the people for us, please?
I'm happy to. I'm Jeff Altenberg. I'm a deputy district attorney in the Milwaukee County DA's office. I oversee our general crimes unit. I am looking forward to this conversation because I also oversee our community prosecution unit and our early intervention unit, which is the unit that tries to identify people that we can divert from the criminal justice system. So I really look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Brother Jeff. Representative Brostoff, can you introduce yourself also?
Sure. Hey, I'm State Representative Jonathan Brostoff. I got baby Barack here with us, who got up a little earlier from his nap than normal, so that's why I had to dip out right quick in the beginning, but you got 2 for 1, so there you go. So anyway, yeah, I appreciate you having us, and thanks to Taylor for the invite, but yeah, happy to have the conversation and be a part of this. The mic situation seems to have gotten a little bit better, but it's a little bit hard on our end to hear you still, just as a heads up, so you might have to repeat some of the stuff. But yeah, happy to have the conversation. We got a ton of work to do, and I'm hopeful that there's the kind of energy in the community as well as the general sentiment for change in the air, where we can make some strong positive changes and correct some horrific injustices that are continuing to plague our communities, and the Black community specifically. So happy to have a conversation about that, and thanks for having us. And Barack says thanks too. He's got his green passy, so you can't really see it, but there you go.
Thank you, Representative. Sister Tiffany, can you introduce yourself, please?
Good afternoon. Welcome. I'm glad to be here. Thank you to all of us, Sir None of Wisconsin, and Gabby for the invitation, to you, Brother Khalif, for extending that invitation. I'm glad to be joined by such an esteemed panel today, talking about a very important issue that has been plaguing our community. And it's good to be able to have the discussion, but it's even better for us to now move forward with action. We know that policing in our communities is something that we need to address. We need to address the criminal justice system and how it has not been beneficial for the Black and Brown communities as a whole. So I'm glad to be a part of this conversation. Again, thank you for the invite, and I look forward to us getting into some dialogue.
Can you tell us, sorry, Tiffany, can you tell us who you are and who you're with?
Oh, that is so right. I also, first of all, I'm Tiffany Henry, and I'm a Black woman. Before I'm anything else, I'm that. But professionally, I work for United States Senator Tammy Baldwin. I serve as her Milwaukee office director.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Brian Clancy, Milwaukee County Supervisor. Can you introduce yourself? I believe for the 4th District from now.
Thank you. I am Ryan Clancy, Milwaukee County Supervisor for the 4th District, which is parts of the South Side of Bayview. This is my first term on the county board. I jumped in with both feet, and I'm really happy to be here for this session from All of Us or None. Among other things, I sit on the Judiciary Committee at the county, which does or should have some oversight over the Sheriff's Office. I've also been functioning as a volunteer legal observer at the ACLU, in which I've been observing interactions between the police and others. So especially in the last year, those things have been very different than what they normally look like, often a little bit more disturbing than and I'm really happy to be here and to turn some insight into action. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Ryan. Appreciate that. We have Sequana Taylor, County Board Vice Chair. Can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sequana Taylor. I'm the Vice Chair of the Milwaukee County Board. I service District 2. It's the Midtown area, and I go out to County Line Road. Thank you all for being on, and I am always honored to have the opportunity to continue to work with All of Us or None as the moderator.
Awesome. Thank you, sister. I appreciate you always. We have in the building with us Chief Jay Norman. Can you introduce yourself, Brother Chief Jay Norman?
Yes. Okay. Appreciate the invitation. Appreciate being part of this conversation. I'm the acting chief of Milwaukee Police Department, Jeffrey Norman, lifetime resident of Milwaukee, 25-year veteran on the Milwaukee Police Department. Community engagement is very big to me. Beyond just being a professional, who is a public servant, but also as a resident of the city. It is important that we have different levels of engagement, to have these discussions. So I'm very pleased and humbled to be part of this. Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to introduce the directly impacted panel, and we'll start with the people that are joining us virtually. And so I would like to start with Vaughn. Just a quick introduction, Vaughn.
Peace. I am Vaughn Mays, community activist, founder of Community Task Force MKE and Program the Parks MKE. Always a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you so much for making the accommodations. Supervisor Taylor and Vaughn are in Mississippi. So they are doing the work, but they're taking it on the road. All right. So next, we'd like to hear from Percy Hayes.
Hey, y'all. Is my mic on?
I can hear you.
Can y'all hear me? Hey, I'm Percy Hayes. I'm just a member of the community. I'm also a member of the People's Revolution.
Wonderful. And in person, we have the wonderful Weta Locke. Weta, would you like to introduce yourself?
Weta Locke.
A lot of feedback from somebody.
If you guys could please mute your microphones if you're not speaking, that would be wonderful.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Weta Locke. What is not on? You gotta talk right into the mic. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm grateful to be here today to serve on this panel. I'm with Expo, Ex-Incarcerated People Organizing, and I also serve on the board as the chairperson.
Awesome. So y'all give our panelists, our esteemed panelists, a round of applause. Give them a warm welcome.
And also, just real quick, Commissioner Avalos had texted me. She had to get going, but she wanted to say that although she had to hop off for a medical thing, the Fire and Police Commission that she serves on is an independent body who oversees the fire and police departments here in Milwaukee. And the commission sets their policies, establishes recruitment and testing standards, hears appeals for discipline, investigates and monitors complaints, and disciplines employees for misconduct. So she wanted to say sorry she couldn't stick around for the rest of it, but it's a wildly important oversight body, and she's happy to continue the conversation directly with anyone who wants to get in touch with her. And she left her email address, which is amaval@milwaukee.gov. And again, she apologized she couldn't stick for the whole thing.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Brostaff. And we apologize that we couldn't get going faster, but technology is a wonderful thing. It's also an awful thing. So Mariah Smith is back from the People's Revolution. Mariah, could you please introduce yourself? You have to unmute yourself. Like I said, technology is wonderful and awful. All right. We're gonna, if Mariah is able to unmute herself, we'll meet her in a minute.
All right. Well, while we wait for Mariah to chime into the conversation, we're just gonna go ahead and get started. Again, we apologize for the late start. Technological problems are always a problem over here. So we're gonna get started. We're gonna start with our directly impacted panelists. And we're gonna go one by one. And what we wanna talk about is the effects of policing in our community. From your experience, how has policing affected you and the community? And what kind of experience have you had with police in the community? We'll start with Brother Vaughn.
Peace. So for myself, as a youth, as a young person, and being that I'm in Mississippi, I grew up here. So from 4 to 14, I was here in Mississippi where I didn't have much police contact, didn't really have many, but probably as many issues as I can count on one hand when it came to policing and misconduct or anything of that nature. When I came to Milwaukee, I tell the story about how my first interaction was with a TOSA officer who ousted me from TOSA after an event and told me home isn't this way and made me get on the bus and go home. And from there, I noticed that there's a problem with policing. Also, as a young teen, homeless teen in Milwaukee, who came into issues with my family and ended up homeless out on the streets, again, started to engage in crime and things of that nature. We had run-ins with police from things that we were doing and just typical, everyday interactions that had nothing to do with us doing anything wrong necessarily. So experiences like them speeding down the street with their lights on and like stopping abruptly at a crowd of us or a group of us or, wherever we were standing to pretty much see if we were going to run or not, to actually doing something wrong and being chased. A couple times I can account where I was almost ran over and hit by squad cars while being chased on foot. Those things are traumatic experiences. And even as an adult, even when I had no warrants, when I wasn't doing anything wrong, to see a police officer or a squad car just causes a certain thing in your mind where you get fidgety and you're like, what are they doing? What is this interaction going to go like? Are they going to get behind me and pull me over for no reason? I can attest to how experiences can turn into trauma. And that affects our relationship with police. I've brought this up to the chief and a number of other individuals about even day-to-day crime, how there's issues with victims dealing with police, with witnesses coming forward to police, with the process of filing complaints, how officers conduct themselves when they're stopping you, the language, how the respect factor, all of those different things add to why crime is the way that it is in our community. And there's accountability on all sides. And again, I'm all for fixing those problems or getting to the root of them.
Awesome. Thank you. Sister Tiffany.
Yeah, I was just going to share I've had numerous experiences. And sometimes people think that if you wear a certain hat or you have a particular title, that excludes you from any type of profiling or negative interactions with law enforcement. But that's not the case. It is all because of the skin that you wear. And oftentimes the makeup of that particular officer, and the culture of some police departments, and what's rooted in that. But I definitely have had experiences, and most definitely the most recent one, my arrest with the Wauwatosa Police Department because of my involvement in the protest, and the curfew ordinance. But just seeing overall, even family experiences that my brother, who has been involved and had different interactions with law enforcement as well, and how the justice system has not just been fair to him in comparison to other individuals who've experienced the same type of crimes. And so, I think for me, my personal reason as to why I've gotten involved is because of not just because of what I faced in my lifetime, but overall that there needs to be a shift. There needs to be a huge reform in the way and the culture of policing, and especially how that engagement involves Black and brown individuals, particularly Black and brown men. I often say that while I'm a Black woman, I can't even empathize because I'm not a Black man, and what how Black men and brown men have been targeted, not just in Milwaukee but in communities across this country. And so it's just something that we have to not just talk about, but we have to be doing action. And I think a lot of times people can't connect to it unless it personally happens to them, until they personally know somebody, until they see it, until they feel it. And that's the way that they get their involvement and their engagement in. But definitely just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Sister Tiffany.
Wida, would you like to answer the question?
My experience with the police, the first time that I came in contact with the police, I was like 12 or 13 years old. And that experience that I had with those officers was in Racine, because that's where I was born and raised. So when we moved here to Milwaukee, I had already had this perception of the police, that they can't be trusted. And if anything happened, if it ain't murder, you don't call the police. You handle it yourself. And Vaughn is exactly right. It is a traumatizing type of thing, because I know for me as being an adult, and being in an abusive relationship, because of that trauma, I didn't call the police. And that was the last person I was going to call, was the police. So the experience with police and community policing is very important, because when I hear community policing, I hear the officers that's walking the beat. They know the people that live on that block, not just walking through and being present. There's a community. If you're going to be community, you're going to communicate. So that's where I'm a very firm believer in that. Just saying we're going to do community policing, and I don't even know your name, but I see you every day walking through my neighborhood. So I've truly been traumatized with the relationship with the police, and I appreciate these forums that All of Us or None are putting together, because there's a lot of work to be done.
So to the elected officials, when you hear the experiences of people like Vaughn, Tiffany, and Wida, what is your response to those experiences and those interactions with police? We can start with Chief Norman.
Sorry if I remove my mask. Okay, appreciate it. Well, just as the last panelist said, these are important conversations to have, to not only identify what we need to be working on, but how we should be working on it. believe it was stated already that we have a lot of these conversations, but what's the action behind it? One of the things I like to remind people in regards to my particular position, yes, I am a acting chief. I'm a, chief officer of the police department. Well, I'm a black man first. I'm a black man with a uniform. I am not the, this is a part of who I am, but it's not who I am. I grew up in Milwaukee too. I had my experiences. Before donning this uniform, I got stopped as a kid riding my bike. Questioned about where I got my bike from, why I don't got a license plate. So I understand the depth and breadth of the challenges that the law enforcement community has to overcome in regards to what it means to truly have a relationship. We talk about community engagement. I always say community engagement is not ice cream and lollipops. It's actually having conversations, being a part of these dialogues where we are actually seeing the human face behind the concerns and the frustrations. For us to actually have any impact or to move in the right direction, we have to model it from the leadership. Meaning that we have to show it to the others in regards to that. It's not just only what I'm talking about. You see me in action. I know many of these panelists personally because I make it important for myself to be engaged, communicating, and listening. We always need a dialogue. Doesn't mean that we're going to always agree. There's challenges in regards to all of our respective arenas of how to operate. But I'm willing to model it for my organization in regards to my expectation of what this community engagement looks like. And it's more than just saying it as a word, collaborations and togetherness. If it has no substance to it, it's nothing. We have to be genuine in our approach. I intentionally came down here, y'all. Just saying, I'm more than welcome to be put out and asked and questioned in regards to what we're doing because we have to own it. But in the end, I tell the public this, we have to be patient with us though. This is a cruise ship of what this culture's like. It ain't gonna turn on a dime. This ain't a speedboat. We're talking about not only from the magnitude of the people on it, but also how long this has been. It's almost like, when we have certain, habits, what they say, it takes you, just as much time as you create that habit to get out of that habit. So we have a lot of work to do. I recognize our shortcomings and I'm not pleased with some of the things I'm seeing. One attendance for my leadership coming into the police department, and I told the entire department, accountability is real. And I tell people all the time, accountability start with me. People's like, oh, what does that mean? Start with you. If I can be held accountable, everyone under me can be held accountable. And I'm not talking about just the officer and the investigator you see on the street. The fruit doesn't fall far from the tree when you have somebody out there acting a fool. Leadership also has to be held accountable in regards to expectation of professionalism, of respect, but real talk, humanism. Understanding that you're dealing with someone's mother, someone's brother, someone's grandfather, someone's uncle. This is a person, not a thing, not a cog, not a machine. And we need to be held accountable when we go outside the lines of disrespecting someone's mother, someone's grandmother, someone's family. My grandmother still lives on 15th and Ring. Y'all don't even have to probably cut me off, because I can talk all day and every day.
I can listen to you.
But I will say this much. I don't want bad cops either. I don't know if everybody hearing me. I don't want bad cops either. Get that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, brother. Chief Norman. Awesome. Brother Ryan, my man. You want to chime in?
I would love to. And thanks again for having this and for this forum. This really is an important conversation. And when I'm listening to the stories of impacted individuals here today, they are backing up what the data says which is that police do not make us safe. They do not make our communities safe. And they, in fact, take resources away from the investments that we know do make our neighborhoods better places to live and safer places to live. And it's increasingly clear that we can't change policing through tiny incremental reform. There's no amount of moderate training or really good PowerPoint presentations, or even frankly by eliminating a few bad cops, but through actual accountability by fundamentally rethinking the idea of policing and then pulling funds away from the police, away from the sheriff's office, and reinvesting that where we know and where it's proven it will do the most good. So I want to be sure that our framing of this is not on tiny changes to a system that's not broken and needs to be fixed, but reinvesting in what we know will make us better and safer as a community.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Ryan. I appreciate that response. Jeff, can you chime in?
Happy to. And I really appreciate hearing the comments of Chief Norman, but also the comments of Ms. Locke, because when we talk about community policing, it's problem-solving policing, it's problem-solving prosecution. And what we have to get closer to is individuals like Ms. Locke being able to walk down their street, see an officer, know that officer's name, and be able to engage in a conversation. And ultimately, I do think that's the vision of what this community would love to see. Now, of course, that takes money, that takes time, that takes resources. I certainly appreciate the comments of Supervisor Clancy. I do think that we have to continue to invest in resources that are non-law enforcement. The reality is the police get called to situations that, frankly, they don't want to be involved in. And I'm talking about individuals with significant mental health issues, individuals with significant drug and alcohol addictions, and oftentimes individuals that have both those chronic issues. At the same time, we still have a need in our community for people to feel safe. We have a significant amount of firearm violence. We have a significant amount of person-on-person violence. And ultimately, we do need trained individuals to respond to those situations. We have an overabundance of victimization in our community, and I certainly am not minimizing the trauma that people like Mr. Vaughn Mays feel and others. We certainly understand that. And that's why in the DA's office, John Chisholm has really tried to put an emphasis on problem-solving prosecution, getting his prosecutors out of the courtroom and into the neighborhoods to try to work with individuals, a lot of which are on this call, to try to address problems at the ground level, frankly, before they come into the court system, before the police department have to get involved. And the other place he's put a lot of resources on is diversion, is trying to keep people out of the criminal justice system. Because we all know once you're in, it's incredibly difficult to get out. So I do think there are very positive things that are happening. I would agree with you, they're not happening fast enough. And I do think conversations like this go a long way to continuing to change that dynamic.
Thank you, Brother Jeff. I appreciate that. Representative Brostoff.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Tiffany, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, just two things here. I think, we're talking about two different things. I think we have to merge them together because we have to identify there are two types of problems. This is just my opinion. Doesn't make it right. Doesn't make it wrong. But just from my vantage point, I think we're talking about policy and we're talking about a culture. I think with policy-wise, yes, we definitely have to, those who are elected officials and who myself work for elected officials have to understand that there are policies that have been, rooted and made and created that before you even get to the policy, like we have to talk about just the culture of policing that even gets people to why those policies are bad for them. So when I say that, I mean that So there's a culture of policing that where there needs to be leadership within. So I'm glad that, he's on the call today. Representative from the police department is on the call today because to talk about the real part of it, that there needs to be real conversations within police departments about how their actions are being counterproductive to Black and brown communities. And you need police officers, who are willing to address those things, to talk about those things and fix those things, and not just see it as where it has to be community fixing that. There also has to be some fixing within the police department as well. People who are officers who are willing to stand up, individuals who have leadership roles willing to stand up and say that we're not going to take that anymore. We're not going to be that type of police department. We're not going to John Wayne our communities. We're not going to be that to our communities. We want to be what we have supposed to set out to be, and that is to protect and serve. The second part of that is, yes, we need policy to match that. We need laws to match that. But right now, we don't see laws. We don't see policies that are being effective to Black and brown people. And so those laws have to be changed. Those laws have to be reformed in order to fit with the times, and to fit with what's going on. And so I just wanted to just to share that notion that I don't think this is an overnight thing, and I don't think this is just a one, I should say, emphasis on one thing. I think there has to be a holistic approach to this and how we're having this conversation, but also how we are talking about the action behind it. Again, it's just my opinion. Doesn't make it right or wrong, but just wanted to say that.
Y'all mind if I jump in real quick? When you talk about those actions, Tiffany, I'll bring up two examples of that in motion. Give 1 second, y'all. Okay, so there was just a homicide on 76th Street near, I believe, Mill Road before we left for Mississippi. And when I got there, initially it was reported, I was called because it was reported to possibly be a police shooting. So one, I responded to ensure that, to assist with crowd control and to help differentiate if it was a homicide or a police involved shooting. And once that was determined that it was not, and it was a homicide, we operate in a different capacity on the scene of a homicide. And so what happened was the father showed up, and I believe that was a young man, a teenager, under 18, who lost his life, I believe. When that father showed up, I asked one of the officers, would they tell the detectives that the father was there and he wanted to, information, or he didn't want it, but I could tell, I'm at these things all the time. It would be wise to speak to the father. And when the officer came back, he said, well, the detective spoke to a next of kin, so he doesn't necessarily feel he should talk to the father. And I said, well, can you tell that detective that I'm a community activist on Vaughn Mays, and this is the guy's father. He should spare some time to talk to the father. Something as simple as that can be the difference, which he did. That detective did come 5 or 10 minutes later and speak to the father. Simple things like that, to not disregard the father or the mother of somebody who's laying in the street dead, and they're showing up on the scene distraught, and their family members are all coming to this scene. Something as simple as that, listening to that bit of advice or following up on that was the difference between there being a problem at that scene and there being a smooth transition and them able to do their job and conduct their investigation. Also, there's another instance with the DA's office where you talk about deferred prosecution and things of that nature. You won't believe how many individuals come to me and say, listen, I caught a case. I'm not, me, I'm not a bad person. This is the situation. I either messed up or it wasn't what it seemed. Can you write me a letter, or can you come support me in court? And I can't always come to court, but one thing I would like to be able to do for individuals who I know, who I can vouch for, or who we can work with and say, this is the situation, this is the person, this is the background I know on the person, can we have some sort of deferred prosecution? And that is true in some of the DV cases we work with as well. I'll tell a story a couple of events back where a young lady reached out to us to be retrieved through our tactical extraction from a DV situation. I didn't get to respond in time, and what ended up happening, the lady was like, well, everything is fine right now, I don't need the help. But the very next day, while I was on one of these panels, I got a message saying that lady killed her partner. And that's in all reality, from the event that happened the day before, I'm pretty sure it was probably a self-defense or some type of continuation thing that resulted from that DV and that trauma, where I wanted to be able to reach out to the DA's office and hopefully, give something to make sure that she didn't get a million years for something that she probably couldn't help because she did try to leave that situation. So those are two ways that, when you talk about collaboration or partnership, in those senses where we can help not send somebody to jail, where we can help de-escalate and not make people's job harder or not escalate situations, I think we should be looking to do that a lot more.
Thank you for that. And then we want to make sure Representative Brostoff do answer the initial question, and then we'll move on because we know we got a late start and we want to try to respect everyone's time and also for others who may have questions.
Thank you, Supervisor Taylor. And I think, I think most of the people on this panel quite well, and, maybe a lot of the people in the other room, although I can't see everyone who's out there, but my background is, working in kind of the social service side of things, mostly in homeless shelters, since I was about 14, and that experience and also my understanding of what happened even before then, kind of guides my thoughts on this, which is, and actually it's something directly that Attorney Altenberg mentioned that I want to reference, the difference between being real safe and maybe feeling safe. And there's a difference between feeling safe and being real safe. And one of the questions we as a society have to ask ourselves is, why is 50% of the city budget going to policing when that is not making us real safe? Because they are, by definition, a reactionary force. In other words, we don't prevent crime by police. You answer crime with police. You prevent crime with investment. You prevent crime with enough money, enough jobs, enough social service agencies, enough mental health resources, lower classroom sizes, enough things to make a strong community, to build it up, not tear it down with throwing cuffs on people, throwing them into the street, throwing them into, police vans, putting guns to people's heads, stuff like that. So I think that's one of the fundamental pieces we have to start at. The difference between feeling good and being real good, you know what I'm saying? And I think that when we look at, all sorts of changes our society needs, one of the big fundamental things is a reinvestment into the community, and that's got to come from somewhere. And when you have budgets that are eating up more and more and more of the proportion of a municipality, it's a problem. And anyone who's being intellectually honest with it is going to say it's a problem. Now, you might say, well, the police are being stretched too thin. Yes, they are. Let's help them. Let's make sure they're not having to answer calls, that they don't have years of training, expertise, master's degrees and stuff like that. Yes, they should not be put in those situations. It's not fair to them. Neither is it fair to the community. Yes, let's not have situations in the community that escalate to stuff like what Vaughn had been talking about. And we have to ask ourselves, what would have taken for us not to get there in the first place? What would that have been? Well, certainly, putting more of a police force on the scene wouldn't have done anything. Again, reactionary. What preventative measures could have been done in the first place? What does that look like? And I'll say one last thing. There has to be some significant restructurings across the board, not just of the investment in resources, although certainly we need to reinvest in the community and take resources better placed towards prevention as opposed to punishment. And I mean specifically the police when I say that. But aside from that, we have to relook at how everything's done. Look at the DA, for example. We got Attorney Altenberg here with us from the DA, right? there's a fundamental problem, and I'm not putting you on blast, Jeff. I'm just saying there's a fundamental problem in our society with how district attorneys are created and operated. Why? Because they are reliant upon the police in a significant way to do their job, especially as elected officials, but even just for convictions. In other words, when they are dealing with corrupt cops, it's really hard for them to prosecute them. Why? Because the police, sees their blood is blue and not red. It's a whole big family, and if you pick on one of us, pick on all of us. And even the corrupt cops that got to get other for accountability reasons, they can't go after, because what happens the next day? You might have a police officer in court on some, low-level drug charge that's up there, or some other thing that the DA needs them to testify for, and says, oh, well, maybe I remember it was a blue shirt, it was a dark blue, they might, maybe that memory gets a little fuzzy. And maybe that testimony gets a little different, and maybe that conviction rate starts going down, and maybe that district attorney starts looking less and less effective, and they're up every 4 years. Not only that, but just for the very function, not only for re-elections, but for the very function of their job, they have to have an incredibly strong working relationship with the police, or else they can't work. That is a conflict of interest. It's incestuous, and it makes for bad outcomes in our society. It encourages corrupt cops and bad policing, and it does not allow for accountability and transparency. And that's just one tiny issue. I have a bill to deal with that. We have bills across, I have about 24 bills or so in a series of them that are dealing with that and other issues. But that's only one little issue. I'm going to give one more quick issue, and then I want to give my time up. But one of the other bills I'm working on is on qualified immunity, and that's an issue that's come up recently, but it's something most people never even heard of before. And when it comes to police, it's a specific protection that they get when it comes to them, police officers, law enforcement officers, violating the constitutional rights of other people. And this is something that no one should like. And every single honest cop should be out there fighting to get rid of qualified immunity, because it protects the bad cops and makes it harder for the good cops to do their job. So every single officer that's being honest with you says, yes, we need to get rid of qualified immunity. If they're not, they are being dishonest or intellectually disingenuous. That's a fact. And I'm happy to have that conversation with any of them who need to learn a little bit more of what qualified immunity exactly means. But the fact that you have people protected against doing some of the most heinous crimes to civilian population, including killing, is a problem. And this is a unique protection that, doesn't even make sense. And it's only and one of the main arguments against, well, if you do that, cops are going to get sued. You're not going to have any good cops left. Well, you know what? It's fairly recent. In the early 80s, this was created. So what? There weren't any good cops before the early 80s? So anyway, ending qualified immunity, relooking at how there's transparency and accountability within policing, and just reframing the society of what police do in our culture all need to be part of the conversation. And that begins with a significant readjustment of where our resources are being spent. And I would argue they're best spent on building up, not tearing down, on prevention, not punishment. And that's what I'm working towards. I know a lot of people on this panel as well, but that's what I'd like to see. So that's my reaction.
And thank you for that, Representative Brustoff. I have two comments, and then we'll go to those that directly impacted our advocates. One of the things that I've heard in the community, and we've talked about on the county as well too, but I want to shift my gears because I'm here to be a moderator, is creating a system, because we all can say we've had some type of negative experience with a police officer, but I can also say I've had a good experience. And so if what we create is a system of those police officers that have some things on their record within the community, we want it to be transparent. And so I've heard people in the community talk about creating this database, because if you work a job and you're able to work in Milwaukee, but something happens in Milwaukee, but you're able to go work in Illinois without them having to know all of the things that aspired in Milwaukee, then they feel that that's a disservice regardless of where you're working at. And so I know we don't have anything like that in place, but it's been talked about, I believe, at several of these panels. And how do we get to it? And this isn't to single out cops. We can talk about that in other professions as well, too, because if we want to be held accountable as people, then we have to hold everybody else accountable as well, too. And going back to what Brustoff said with the immunity or working within the community, the residency from Milwaukee was lifted. And I heard it come up in several conversations before, too, that if you are going to police a community that you do not stay in, you are not connected to that community. So you don't understand the things that go on within a community when you say outside of that community. So I do believe that it's something that we have to look into. That is not saying that you can't live in Whitefish Bay and be a police officer in Milwaukee and make a difference, but it's saying that those that live within the city and county of Milwaukee should be the ones that represent those communities. For those that are directly impacted and for the advocates, what is a solution that you think that we can do as a collaboration with law enforcement, with elected, and with the community so that we are servicing our community correctly? So we know that there's a ton and a laundry list of issues and challenges, but what is an idea or strategy that we can put into place that either isn't currently being done or needs to be revamped so that we can start working together more collective?
And we just had Brother Percy Hayes come in from the People's Revolution. Could you introduce yourself and then respond to Supervisor Taylor's question?
Thank you.
Percy Hayes, a black man, and a member of the People's Revolution. Like I said again, I'm Percy Hayes. I'm just a black man in this community and a member of the People's Revolution. To answer Saquana's question, I think one of the things that's needed in this community is a community oversight board, a board with members of this community, just regular Joe Schmoes in this community, who oversee police complaints, who are part of the hiring process. One thing that Saquana just mentioned was the, I forget the name of it, it was the residency requirement. They lifted that residency requirement, I think, in 2016, and that allows cops who don't interact with minorities on a regular basis, who don't live in communities with minorities, to police minorities. And they come in with this preconceived notion of who we are, what we are, and they treat us accordingly. So I would like to see the residency requirement reenacted here in Milwaukee, and the police officers who represent this community, who police this community, represent and live in this community. That's one of the things I like to see happen.
Thank you, Brother Percy. Sister Weta.
What Supervisor Taylor was talking about, I would like to see, well, actually piggybacking off of Percy, that policing changed when they changed that policy. You know, and the attitude of how you treat us as black and brown people, it changed. You know, I've had several conversations with people, you know, with some of us who've been here all our lives. You know, we've seen Milwaukee transform, and sometimes it's like an alien to me, you know. But we've had many conversations about the policing and how the policing has changed. And I think that them not being required to live within Milwaukee County has really affected on how they police. You know, when I live in the 53206, and a lot of times I see our black men sitting on the curb, you know, while the truck or car is being searched, and you got 5 police cars, you know, out here to search this car. And specifically Wednesday night, I saw it. And as they searched the car, they got them sitting on the curb, and you got the police cars out there, lights going. You would have thought it was a homicide that went on or armed robbery, only not to find anything, you know, because he was driving legal, you know. But just the fact that you got them on the curb for like 30 minutes searching, just trying to find something, you know, and it's all because of look over and you see 3 black men in the car. Oh, they got to be doing something, you know, we gonna pull them over. So I think it's very important that we have to educate, and as far as holding them accountable, you know, it's doable with the community being an oversight. You know, I don't believe that it's effective with other Wauwatosa police investigating an incident with Milwaukee police or Milwaukee sheriff. I don't believe that's effective because there is a bond between police, regardless of where you are, and we see that bond when officer get murdered. They come from all over the state, and sometimes they come from across country. So the bond is there just because they're the police. To hold the police accountable and they get charged, now we're talking about another culture because people have been brainwashed or, there's a word, I'm trying to find it, but convinced that police are good, they are protectors, they serve our community, to fathom that a police officer did not hold up his oath is very difficult for a DA to even get a conviction because we're talking about jurors that don't understand what's going on in our community and versus what's going on in theirs. They have no clue because we're not serving on juries. That's another topic.
It's a bunch,
yeah, but I'll yield.
Thank you, Sister Wita. I appreciate that. Sister Peggy, you want to chime in?
Say something to that too, right quick?
Oh, definitely.
Okay, sorry. Thanks. Just to follow up, I think that's a great point. And just to piggyback off it real quick, it's even when you can get to a point where it's so egregious, you're going to have a DA that's willing to go after a cop, which is extremely rare, and Jeff can speak to that. Even in that situation, you still do have a bias with the jury if it's a jury trial towards the police, and they get an incredible amount of scales tipped in their favor. And that's only the ones you hear about, but there's a ton you don't even hear about. For example, I remember, July 5th wasn't, even that long ago, and this is one where Percy was at, and he saw it directly as well as some other people who might be in the audience. There was a situation where you had an off-duty officer, Officer Willman, who assaulted two people, including, concussing one of the people who were all doing the egregious thing of taking photographs. After his wife was, yelling racial epithets at them and got up to go throw a drink at people and stuff like that for just walking by her, it was so upsetting that they were exercising their, speech, near her. She had to run up, throw their drink. He got up, started swinging on people. He was drunk at that point. But then what happened? They found out it was an officer involved. They delayed. Instead of, if this was some, black dude on 17th and Keefe who was drunk and swinging on people, they would have put him in the car, taken him up in 5 minutes. But instead of that, they waited, let him sober up, let the victims feel the pressure, and then ultimately tried to pressure them away from doing it. Say, we could charge him with something, but then we have to charge you too, and you got to go to work tomorrow, and it's kind of late already. It's already 11 o'clock. Like, let's just make this go away type stuff, right? How often is that happening? And that was the sergeant. That was the supervising officer, Sergeant Michael Dix, who did that. And I know we have the police chief here, so I hope he's aware of this as well. But we had Sergeant Dix there who tried to cover for it. Now, we know that obviously Officer Willman does have a record, and there are other issues that he's had in the past, and there was even disciplinary, but how many times was it covered up? And how many more Officer Willmans are there having Sergeant Dix covering for them? So even when it gets to the point of, having some egregious situation, the scales are still tipped in their favors. But how many times does it stop before it gets there? Because they don't want to have a paper trail, because you got cops covering up for dirty cops. So, to your point, I just wanted to elaborate on that, because I've seen that with my own eyes, and we're still going after it. And, the last chapter on that's not done yet, but that's happening right here in Milwaukee. That's happening every single year. So anyway, I just wanted to elaborate on that, but thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Representative Brostoff. Before we go to Peggy, Chief, you want to respond to that?
Sure. I know there's a number of different challenges. One of the things I look at what we can do with the community between the work of the Milwaukee Homicide Review Commission, Office of Violence Prevention, the DA's office, getting to the root of a lot of our problems that are establishing violence, meaning that working together to talk about those issues, poverty issues, the employment issues, there's a lot of services in our community that's not being coordinated to address these underlying causes that we have to work better with each other. Community engagement to me, again, is one, pointing out what are our problems. The public speaks on that, and demanding the resources beyond just the police. I think sometimes the canary in the mine that's going on right now, some of the things that we see with police is towards a larger issue that we have to be just as, I would say, proactive in addressing in regards to why certain services are not being distributed, being fair, being just as useful in our community. That's a larger question that we need to talk about that I don't believe there's enough talking about. And I know that we're trying to do some different ways of addressing, especially those who are victimized, those who are witnesses. There is issues that need to be immediately addressed. And one of the things that's coming out of this particular public health model is addressing those immediately, meaning that with the information that police can provide or our partners, the Milwaukee Fire Department can provide, having within 24 hours or 48 hours, some sort of addressing the trauma, addressing possible homelessness, possible employment from the resources from the Department of Human Health Services, from the, city health, because those are, again, where we can really put the rubber to the road in regards to having impact with those who have the most need. This is not an all-encompassing answer. Again, I was asked, what can we do? Those are one of the things that I am pushing forth to be assistive, because too often the police has not been a part of these conversations, and it's not always a hammer to fix every problem, meaning law enforcement or having some type of jailing or, arresting or patrolling. We have to have innovative and collaborations. And I talk about collaboration, not in just a catchy phrase, but as in genuine collaboration to get the most out of your governmental services in this city and in this county.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that. Percy, you had a quick follow-up question, then Peggy, and then Vaughn.
I mean, to speak to what Jonathan Brostoff was just talking about, to speak to what Jonathan Brostoff was just talking about, the July 5th incident. It took almost a year to see any action taken up against the officer who several people witnessed, drunk, intoxicated, and assault two people. It took almost a year. And I think what he was saying was, had the roles been reversed and one of us had a swung off on him, we'd have been put in a squad car in that moment. What are you doing to change that atmosphere? Because that is a culture. Those cops came out there with a cultured attitude, and their attitude was to put the pressure on the witnesses. And even the people that were assaulted that day, they received disorderly conduct tickets for their actions for being assaulted. They received disorderly conduct tickets for being assaulted. And 8 months later, Officer Willman gets a 45-day suspension that's not even consecutive. They broke this up over the course of, I guess, the next 8 months. So he'll get 2 non-paid vacation days every week from now for the next 8 months. What are y'all doing to change this culture? Because this is a culture. They were comfortable in behaving this way.
So in response to that, the challenge that we have to realize is that there are rules, unions. There's a lot of things that goes into play when we have these particular situations that binds administration in regards to due process. So when we talk about how fast things move, there's a lot of forces that we are not aware of that's behind the scenes can slow things down and make it challenging in regards to how we address things. There is contractual laws. There is a lot of different players involved in ensuring that it's not as easy as a flick of a wrist or saying you're done. As much as people may think that is, the same thing about somebody being arrested. Is it horrible? Absolutely. But the judicial process, I mean, some people can be dealing with their case for 2-3 years.
But the action is imminent in the beginning. It's imminent. Like I said, again, there was an accusation made that this officer assaulted somebody. Like I said, if the roles were reversed and this was an average citizen, those contractual obligations don't exist. That person is arrested right away, and then the investigation begins. So these guys operate under a separate set of rules, and they know that. They know this, and this is why they come into our communities and treat us this way, because they know there are contractual obligations that prevent them from being held accountable for their actions in the beginning. So again, the question is, what do you do to change that atmosphere?
Again, what I do is making sure that there is a fair process and accountability. But again, I have boundaries, I have responsibilities. When I go outside the line of what expected from the administration to do, it's very difficult to have any type of support of any punishment if I go outside the lines of the rules of engagement on this. As much as we want to have things done immediately, and there is a lot of strings being pulled in regards to that, this is a greater issue than just what the administration can do. These are laws that we have. 6250, again, is a process on the state statute books. Again, there's a lot of things that come into play when we try to address things that makes it difficult. But on the flip side, it is about due process. It's about fairness. I know that is a challenge. It is frustrating. But, again, there are certain things I have to follow as the chief executive, unfortunately.
Okay, so
all right, thank you, thank you, Chief. Let's keep the program rolling. Sister Peggy.
All right. So I think there's a couple of things. There's things that we need to do on both sides, obviously. But first of all, I would love to see the Milwaukee Police Department hold a series of town hall meetings, go out into the community and talk to people about their experiences. I understand that that's uncomfortable, but I think that like we do with restorative justice, you have to be able to address people's trauma. And from that, I would like to see you compile that information and figure out what is the number 1, 2, 3 things that are prohibiting us or impeding us from being collaborative in protecting our communities. So if it's mental health, then let's put together a community advisory board and talk about mental health. If it's a culture of the police department, which it probably could be, let's put together a community advisory committee and have a subcommittee that talks about that. How do we dismantle, all of these impediments that we have to working together? Now, that's on the police, on the police side. On the community side, we're just as guilty. I grew up in the Latino community. I am Latina. My father was undocumented. We did not call the police. We lived in fear. And just like Wida said, for different reasons, but the same. And so we allowed ourselves to become victims. And so you have very high rates of crime on the South Side because we have people that come and say, we know they're not going to call the police, which is horrible. It's horrible for us and it's horrible for you. And again, as Representative Steph said, how does this make our communities safer? It doesn't. The other underlying issue here is that if we have police contact, then we have contact with the criminal justice system, and we're feeding our carceral system, which again is not, is not productive to Black and Brown people. So we really have a problem here that we all need to be a part of, and so we have to figure out, and we have to be able to put things aside and say, really for the greater good of the community, we really need to all get at the table and figure out what has to happen. And again, if it's policy, we have some wonderful state legislators that are willing to work on policy. The district attorney's office, knock on wood, I've never gone to him and said, John, I think there's a problem with this, and had him say, we can't do anything about that. He at least has, one solution or a half a solution that, he's willing to work with and meet people where they need to be. We do have a lot of problems that go beyond the police station, the court system. A lot of them got mentioned here today. But I think for what we can work on as a community, we definitely need to get there. But there does need to be some healing that has to take place before that happens, because trust has been broken. And, it takes a minute to fix.
Just real quick, which is, again, reflective of what I'm bringing to this table. How many times have you had a talk with a police chief face to face?
Right.
How often have you had a police chief in the years of police chiefs in the city be part of this conversation? This ain't the first time. We have to be able to have these real talk conversations. MPD is a large organization. One of the things that's a disconnect for the upper echelon from the lower, and not saying there's a have and have nots, is understanding all of these things that's going on. And only through dialogue and conversations do we know what is actually going on within our house. So I just want to remind that, the intention is here. There's a genuineness to be able to have these conversations, to be able to have this discussion face to face.
Right.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that. After we go to Brother Vaughn, we're going to open it up to the community so you guys can interface with the officials and the directly impacted panel. And I'll turn it over to our co-moderator at that point. But Brother Vaughn, his response to Supervisor Taylor's question.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. So Vaughn will be speaking from mine because his phone went dead. And then we'll turn it over to those that may have questions that are there. Also, if somebody is live in it, I think if Gabby is there, if she can then speak up about any questions that they have on the live comments. So here's Vaughn.
Awesome. Thank you.
Pete, so my input would be, 1 second. So I know Supervisor Taylor just informed me about a resolution through the county. And I've also spoken to some Republicans at the state level that are talking about legislation that deals with creating a database that will prevent officers from being able to, get fired or resign. Well, I don't even know if that's what it's catered to, but there's supposed to be a start of a collection of right. Now my thing would be I've been since we started the protest, I started with a list of demands, and one of those lists of demands, and I'm not one that likes to play with semantics and words. I mean what I say what I mean. We need a red flag system. Now, the reason why I say that is because some of these officers that we're talking about, they have done things in the past, and had there been a checking system, once they get so many complaints of a certain nature, they automatically should be getting called in for review of their employment. They automatically should be getting called in review for psych evals and things of that nature. That way you catch them early before this stuff builds up and they are allowed to form a culture where they're comfortable getting away with this stuff. Even Dominic Hagan Brown was able to text a supervisor and say, I need help after raping somebody. Like, why would you be comfortable doing that? I would investigate not just Hagan Brown, but I would have investigated that supervisor as well. So those things, in my opinion, need to happen. We need to be catching these officers when they first start to do things wrong. Now, I know there'll be pushback from that. People don't like the terms defund the police. They don't like red flag system. They don't like these terms. Again, whatever term you want to use, checks and balances, reinvest, reallocate. Like, we mean the same. We're talking about the same stuff. At the end of the day, in my opinion, there needs to be some system that prevents these officers from being unable to continue employment or to continue to hide under veils with stuff in their personal files that never gets revealed or people never know about until they do something major. And I get what the chief is talking about when it comes to the police union. At some point, we have to do something about the police union. What I don't understand is how is Mattioli, how is this officer that assaulted protesters and photographers and women able to access privileges that are supposed to be entitled to on-duty officers when they commit crimes off duty? I don't understand that. How is that possible? I don't understand why they are entitled to those privileges. There needs to be a clear, defining legislation or something that prevents them from being able to do that. That is a major piece I believe is missing as well.
Brother Percy, you had a follow-up for Vaughn?
You said Mattioli. That's the second Milwaukee officer who did something wrong. Mattioli is actually a killer. You were talking about Matthew Willman. I just wanted to make that correction.
Okay. Representative Brostoff had something to say, but before you go, we just wanted to give some quick guidelines for the community piece. So we're going to ask that the community come up to ask questions, make the questions very brief and very pointed, and come up to the microphone, state your name, whether or not you represent an organization or if you're here as an individual or a concerned community member, and state your question. And then if you want to direct it to a specific panelist, you can direct it to a specific panelist. If the question is an open-ended question, that can go to any one of the panelists that wishes to take on that question. I ask that the panelists keep possible for the sake of time. Representative Brostoff.
Well, actually, I was just going to address the state law that's being proposed, but it looks like Supervisor Clancy wanted to grab that one, so I'll defer to him because I know he's also well up on it.
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor Clancy. And then after that, if you can have them up by the mics so that they can be ready to go with the questions or comments. And then also for those questions or comments, just so because we know other people are listening and we're live, if someone is speaking and then you want to answer, let us know so then you can answer, because then it becomes kind of like a conversation and others may not be able to follow it, or you're talking back and forth. So if you can address the other people on the panel, but address it through the moderator. And so that way we can kind of keep things well going. So Supervisor Clancy, and then we'll go to the comments.
Thank you, Supervisor. And I just wanted to real briefly address the idea of a database as kind of as a cure for some of the things going on. It's not that it's a bad idea, but the idea of a database has to take place along with all these other incremental reforms at the same time as we move resources away from the police into the things that we know work. Joseph Mensah killed 3 people in 5 years in Wauwatosa and was then hired very recently by the Waukesha County Sheriff's Office. It's not that that sheriff didn't know that Joseph Mensah killed 3 people in 5 years. It was that was a job qualification, not a disqualifier. So absolutely, it's not a bad thing to have more information on folks as they, as they commit these heinous crimes against us and against our communities. But it's important to not be distracted by this as being some sort of a cure-all. The idea is not that these departments don't have the information. It's that they're choosing to either look the other way or they're saying this is a good thing. The idea that somebody, even if they were cleared 3 separate times in 5 years, couldn't de-escalate the situation successfully any of those times would seem to disqualify him from service in law enforcement forever. And yet that seems not to be the issue. So database is a good idea, but not at the expense of other more serious accountability ways and defunding, frankly.
All right, thank you for that, Supervisor Clancy. I see someone at the mic, so if you can once again say your name, or if you're representing the organization, you definitely can say who you are addressing the question to, and then I will call on that person.
All right. So I had 2 very brief questions, and this is specifically for Chief Norman, but once he answers, any of the panelists, particularly elected officials or and protesters, anyone, you're happy to respond. So these questions involve the general issue of surveillance in the community, an issue which has become a lot more of a widespread issue since the George Floyd-inspired protests have began, particularly around the people, protesters who support different families who've experienced police violence, as well as those families themselves experience these phenomena, both what they feel is in-person surveillance and electronic stuff. So 2 questions. First, and just as a note, these reports are really identical. They're almost like echoes. They're so identical. So my name's Isaiah, and I'm a local journalist in the community. First, what are you willing to do to increase transparent oversight of the Milwaukee PD's cell site simulators, or Stingrays, and other technology which the department uses to track and intercept phone signals and communications of citizens? Second, do you and will you support a full, transparent, and thorough audit of the and review of the Milwaukee PD's Intelligence Fusion Division and Fusion Center, since they're capable of and most likely responsible for these, or at least related to these reports of surveillance? Or will you allow the department to keep the Fusion Center's activities in the dark by claiming that those activities are too confidential to publicly audit or review? Yield the floor. Thank you all.
Thank you. Now we'll go to the chief, and I just asked also, because everybody can hear the background information, let's make sure we're all muted on here, and then within the audience, when the person is talking, let's just wait until the end. We want to clap. I'm not going to say don't do it, but that we make sure that we can hear the comments or questions. Thanks again, Chief.
In regards to the oversight, the we want to do any type of tracking mechanism has to go through the courts. This is a requirement in regards to the vetting of making sure there's proper probable cause. There is actual evidence that we are in need of something. That's not an automatic. In fact, there are times when things are not allowed in regards to not having enough of the particular evidence to move forward. There is a lot of rules from the federal level and state level, also local level in regards to our procedures. So I believe that that process is vetted properly. It's not something that we decide on to utilize on itself. It has to be signed off by a judge. So there is that oversight in regards to whether or not we're able to actually move forward with any of those particular type of services. The Fusion Center is a more complicated situation. The Fusion Center is made up of a consortium of different agencies. No one agency is actually in control of all the rules. In fact, there is, federal level, there's county level. So it's not within my directive or purview to have complete oversight in regards to their activities. That is something that I am still learning and looking into in regards to the particular activities within the Fusion Center. But it's not just a Milwaukee Police Department control. This is a Fusion Center that's actually servicing the entire Southeast Wisconsin. So there's a lot of levels of, I would say, bureaucracy in regards to something like that that has to be explored more in regards to what we can and cannot do.
Do you support an audit?
Do I what?
If an audit was brought forward, would you support it?
I always believe in transparency, but again, I have to understand what is the full scope of what the audit will reveal. I cannot speak ahead of things I don't have full awareness of what that looks like, but I do believe in transparency. I believe that we should be as vocal and open to the public as possible. But again, rules and boundaries is something is a thing that the police department has to operate under. So I do support it, but at the same time, I don't know the full extent of what I can reveal.
All right, thank you. Is there someone else in line with another question or comment? And then also, because All of Us or None does have like emails, if there are other questions too, please make sure those are submitted. If they cannot be answered today, we'll definitely try to make sure we get that answer to you. The next person, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jimmy McAfee. I am a minister at House of Prayer and Restoration Missionary Baptist Church. I'm the outreach director. Yet today, I stand here representing the Justice for Antonio McAfee campaign. I've come here before, and I thank All of Us and None of Us for allowing these platforms. In 1996, my uncle was arrested and convicted for the killing of a Milwaukee police officer by the name of Wendell Tanner. We have always believed, as we still believe, that Wendell Tanner was actually murdered by his partner, Brian Ketterhagen. Brian Ketterhagen was an officer with UW Parkside prior to becoming a Milwaukee police officer. In 1989, he was fired from UW Parkside for pulling a firearm on one of his own officers, and he was fired from that department. Two questions. One, how could, even in 1993, a police officer who was fired for pulling a firearm on a coworker in another department, number one, be hired as a Milwaukee Police Department officer? He was fired from UW Parkside for using poor judgment, aggressiveness towards fellow employees, and abuse towards fellow employees. We know that Wendell Tanner was shot in his back in 1996 as he was chasing my uncle. And we know that you cannot shoot someone in the back if they are chasing you. One of the things that Brian Ketterhagen said in his testimony was that he saw a silhouette and he shot. We all know that silhouettes are black. So what I would like to ask is, how can we prevent officers like Brian Ketterhagen, number one, from being hired again for the Milwaukee police officers to use the judgment that was used in 1996? And number two, what can be done to correct or to rectify what happened that day? Because we had two men that lost their lives. We had Wendell Tanner, a black officer who lost his life. We had my uncle, Antonio McAfee, who lost his life. And as I said, the thing about the silhouette, so to me, he saw something black and he shot. And the only thing was my uncle, who was the same height, same build, same complexion as Wendell Tanner, they was actually wearing the same kind of clothes because they weren't in clothes. I believe that Brian Ketterhagen
Can any of your Clancy or Jonathan, can y'all hear me on this side?
I can hear you fine, but the other one
We
cut
can't
out.
hear them. I'm trying to get in touch with Gabby so they know that we can't hear it. And thank you guys for staying on. I'll probably just let a couple more go. Just want to respect everyone's Saturdays.
Thank you, and great job as moderating. Appreciate you. Director, supervisor.
Oh, no.
Okay. So it is definitely always a concern when someone has a problematic record. Again, I believe that we have to always start at the same thing. I don't want bad cops on this job as much as you do. I have a black son. I have a black daughter.
Yes, sir.
I have a black wife. Live in the city. When my uniform is off, they don't see me as Chief Norman. I'm a black resident. So I have to look for those optics in regards to behaviors that are concerning to the black and brown, but for all. I have to remind people, this is something that we have to be able to understand how we all, whether race, gender, sexual orientation, all is affected by a bad cop. So for me, I refuse to sit there and stand idle about allowing a bad cop coming on the job. The unfortunate thing is I don't get the last say. So that is a challenge in regards to understanding how this process works and what best doors we need to knock on in regards to how do we make that voice known to the right people who can do something about it. So in regards to the situation, I own it as a chief that, the past is part of what, as a leader, I have to own. There has been a lot of challenges. It's always hard for me to talk about anybody else's situation because Milwaukee Police Department is living in a glass house. You don't throw stones when you live in a glass house. We have to clean up what we have got going on in regards to some of the historical aspects, but it is a challenge. It truly is. Because at the end of the day, even if I recommend, the final analysis or the final say is the Defiant Police Commission, which I respect because they are my boss. Yes, sir. The Defiant Police Commission is who I respond to in regards to questions of what we do in regards to policies and procedures and actions, but they're the ones who decide in regards to whether or not someone stays or leaves this department.
One final question before I take my seat, please. My final question is, what can be done to go back to open up the case of Evelyn Tanner and Antonio McAfee? What can be done to investigate the corruption that took place during that event? Because there were people within the higher echelons of the police department who know exactly what happened. As I stated, with the facts about being shot in the back, I just want to know what can be done internally to go back and review this particular case and to review the facts of this case and to possibly bring about a resolution. My uncle is not innocent. That's not what I'm saying. But he is not guilty of first-degree intentional homicide. So my question really is, what can be done to go back, look at this particular case, look at every player that was involved in this particular case, and to possibly bring a resolution that would be in the interest of our community and in the interest of justice as itself. And anyone can answer that question that hears it. Something happened.
I was just going to say that may be more of a question for the judicial system. I don't necessarily think within the police department, but definitely if the chief wanted to take a swing at it, I would say go ahead. I know the DA's office is on as well, and it may be out of their purview, but maybe you can take that question. Yeah.
There's two Jeffs with that.
Jeff Altenberg.
Sure. At this point, I know very little about that particular incident. Is this something that has been raised with the district attorney's office prior to this conversation? Sir, are you able to tell me?
Yes, sir, it has been.
And what has been the response?
That I cannot say at this point. I can't say that right now, but I know that the issue has been raised. But, you know,
Okay.
I often say that justice delayed is justice denied, and sometimes talk is cheap. And what we're looking for is some results in this matter. My uncle has been gone for 25 years. We'll never, ever
Right.
see Wendell and Tanner again. But, you know, something has to be done. This thing has dragged on for far too long, and so many lives have been affected by it that I believe that something just has to happen. It has to.
Well, what I will do is go back and see to what extent an investigation was overseen by our office, and then I'll just need to get your contact information to follow up with you.
Thank you for
Thank you
that.
so much. Thank you so
You're
much
welcome.
for your time.
Is there the next person that's in line with a question or comment?
All right. My name is Shanquell Bay. Some of you know me as Shanquell Meriwether Bay. I stand here representing my child, whose name is Shanterica Johnson. And I have a couple of issues. And so my questions are definitely to the county district attorney, also to the chief. Although my issue is not with the city of Milwaukee, it's actually with the city of Brown Deer, which would still fall under Milwaukee County. So just to give a quick, because then I can get to my question. So back in 2019, October of 2019, my daughter, who was 18 years old at the time, she had an actual encounter with the police at that time. And when she had that encounter with the police in the Walmart in Brown Deer, she was questioned for her identity, although she did not do anything in Walmart to even be questioned. So at any rate, it escalated to my child actually being assaulted and attacked and also arrested in front of me after I asked the officers what did they need. I said, you know, are you trying to get their identity? I spelled her and her best friend's name for them, so they were identified at that point. They were asking for their fingerprints, and I'm like, what do you need their fingerprints for? But at any rate, after I gave the officers their identity, which was their first and last name, and then I also asked the officers, are they under arrest, several times. The officer said no. And so at any rate, as we're trying to walk out the door, the police officers grabs my daughter and twist her arm behind her back and slam her to the wall and then slam her down to the ground. And at that point, I'm telling my child to calm down because I knew that these Caucasian males would kill my child in front of me. And so I'm telling her to calm down. And although she had did nothing wrong and she was just trying to protect herself, she's trying to get them off of her because these are 3 white males that over 250 pounds apiece. And they're on a 110-pound melanated young woman. And she's screaming for dear life. And I'm standing there as her mother trying to get her to calm down because I know that they would kill her in front of me with no remorse. So at any rate, she's down on the ground. And then all of a sudden, one of the police officers jump up and says, she bit me. She bit me. Now, when he says she bit him, I'm standing there. I'm right there. This is all happening at feet. She did not bite this police officer, but although she was being attacked and assaulted, you know, she could not have intentionally bit him, even if she did bite him. But the video showed that she never bit him. And not only that, the actual bite that the police officer is holding up on video and on camera So at any rate, fast forward to today. So it's been going on 2 years. We're still in court fighting this battle about my child committing a battery to a law enforcement officer, which has not been proven, but now they want her to take deferred prosecution, and she's the victim. So she was the victim that day, and she's still the victim. And I went live on TV and told everyone she was unlawfully arrested. And during that unlawful arrest, the officer claims that he was bitten. So now you're charging her with a crime that she supposedly committed after you assaulted and attacked her. So you're getting fruit from a poisonous tree, which is unlawful because you committed a crime and broke the law, and then you want to charge her with something afterwards. Not only that, my issue is discretion here. She and her best friend were there. They both did not identify, which that is not a crime. That's not a crime, right? But her best friend got tickets in the mail from the municipality of Brown Deer. My daughter was, and I'm feeling like this was a hate crime and retaliation because I am her mother and because I have been fighting with the state of Wisconsin for the last 10, 15 years of my life, in which I won my case. And I feel like it was a retaliation effort and a hate crime. And at the end of the day, my question here is discretion. Why do police officers have that discretion to say, hey, we're going to arrest one of these young ladies, not both, but they both committed the so-called same crime, and I identified them. On top of that, the probable cause was never there. So my issue, and the video shows that. So why is it okay for them to break the law? Why is it okay for them to violate one's human rights, constitutional rights, civil rights? Why is that okay? And now my daughter, who has since then been diagnosed with lupus because she was tased. See, it was a code. Those police officers did a code where he knew that he was violating my daughter's rights. So they needed a code. So I don't know what type of code they did with each other. Next thing you know, he said, she bit me. She bit me. So then he tases my daughter right there in front of me. This is a 110-pound young lady with 3 Caucasian males who look like they're all 250 to 300 pounds apiece. He tases her. And not only does he tase her in front of me, and I'm still sitting there thinking that these people are about to kill my child in front of me. So not only did he tase her, he stuns her the whole time. So now he's sitting on her neck with the taser on her back, because what happens is whenever you launch a taser into someone and then you hold another taser on them, you are still electrocuting them. My daughter has been diagnosed with lupus. She has problems with her body that are unimaginable since then. So her injuries are ongoing. I did file a claim with Milwaukee County. I filed a claim with Brown Deer. I filed a claim with the Attorney General of the state of Wisconsin. They have all been ignored and denied, which we know for a fact she has a claim. We know for a fact that she was unlawfully arrested. We know for a fact that this police officer has this mark on him that is not a bite, but my daughter is now they want her to take a plea and do deferred prosecution, saying, oh, we won't put anything on your record if you just go ahead and say that you're going to go through Justice 2000 and do a program and then write the officer an apology letter. Now, how bad of a spit in the face is that? We're trying to take these. Why are you taking these officers? You're looking. Now, her attorney told us, she said that she knows that it doesn't look like a bite mark. She said, it doesn't look like a bite mark to me. Okay, well, why are we still going to court? Why are you not getting this thing dismissed? Why? And we had a hearing this past week so that we can actually talk about the actual arrest, and that we wanted to challenge the arrest. Guess what? They deflected that hearing and went on to deferred prosecution. They didn't want to deal with the fact that she was unlawfully arrested. So my question, because this is the next problem. Even if we do go to all the news, all over Milwaukee Journal with my child's face saying that she bit an officer. So this is the next problem in Milwaukee, which I know, being a child care provider who was shut down, they were putting our faces all over the news. We were guilty before we could even prove innocence. See, that's the next problem that we have, because my child can't even get a fair trial in Milwaukee County because her face and her mugshot was pushed all over the news, all over the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. So therefore, any juror who go in there, they're disqualified because they watch the news and they see the papers. So they're going to say, oh yeah, that young lady bit that police officer because she was on headlines. That's a problem in Milwaukee as well. Why are we so, it's like it's a big system that goes towards putting our people in a position where they're totally guilty. And it's like everybody's in conspiracy, from these news stations to the Journal Sentinel, to the judges, to the officers. Everybody's working together in collaboration. And guess what? Our people have no way out. So guess what? They take pleas and they take deferred prosecution when they shouldn't even have to, but they know that it's a big animal and a big beast that's coming after them from every angle. And if they don't take that deferred prosecution, they're going to be going to trial. And guess what? Those jurors are most likely going to find them guilty. So they're taking a chance. So I want to know, because I know I've explained myself.
Yeah, so Ms. Meriwether, you have the two questions.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
The first question was in reference, like if you can just make it a question. So the first question is, and then my second question.
Yes, ma'am. So my first question is, what do a person like my daughter who is tired, her body is tired, everything, what does she do? Because now they're psychologically messing with her. What does she do to actually show, because it's already there, that she was the victim? What do you guys do when people are victims in cases like this, but we're still pressing it on to make her the actual perpetrator? That's number one. Number two, is this a budget thing? Because guess what? I grew up in 502. I grew up in 53206. So I'm a product of 53206, right? So is this a budget thing? Can we just all be frank with each other and be transparent that guess what? If we don't put all these people in jail, we're not going to meet the budget. If we don't get these cases adjudicated, those judges don't get paid. These people don't get paid in Milwaukee County. So guess what? In order to make sure these people get paid, we got to adjudicate so many cases, even when these people are not a criminal. So how do we fix that?
So we're going to say, and just so that they can answer, because I don't want the two questions to get mixed. The first one is, what does your daughter do? Because you were there and she clearly did not bite this officer. And then the second thing is this an incentive to financially discredit of these cases going forth, or the monies that we don't have resources for? I believe you did say that will be for Milwaukee County and possibly for the chief. The chief may speak on it, but because it will happen in Bayside and Brown Deer, that is not his jurisdiction. So I'm going to give him that leeway to say if he will want to speak, but then I'm going to go to the Milwaukee County District Attorney's Office for those two questions.
Yes, ma'am. In answer to your first question, what your daughter is going to do is your daughter is going to have her attorney contact me, Jeff Altenberg, at 278-4674, and I am going to meet with your daughter's attorney and your daughter, and we're going to review the case and review the evidence. That's the best I can tell you right now, but I'm pledging to you that that's exactly what we're going to do, and that's what's the best way to proceed. With regard to the second question, there is no connection in between the work that I do and our overall budget. But right, I appreciate your what your perception is, and that's really all I can say to you.
All right, thank you. Chief, did you want to speak on this, or do not? Well, I know it happened in Brown Deer, and so I just want us to always have a kind of clarity and understanding that that's of Milwaukee City, and they do not, he's not the chief of Brown Deer. And so The reason why I'm saying is if he will speak on the case from Brown Deer, he will be speaking as the City of Milwaukee Police Chief, not as the Brown Deer. And so I just want to make sure we have our lines clear for that.
Absolutely. I just wanted to pass my deepest sympathies about your experience and what you're going through. But she is right. That is the village of Brown Deer. I can't be throwing rocks when I got a glass house. So at the end of the day, I definitely respectfully just, want to leave it for the discussion between you and the DA's office and also the village of Brown Deer.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, make sure she gets that number again. She has it, but I just want to make sure she has it. Is there another guest that wants to speak or have a question or comment?
Yes, how you doing, Mr. Quanah?
Thank you. Tell us your name and if you are representing the organization. And if you have a question, we don't really mind the backstory. Not the lady before, thank you for sharing that. I just know we were set to 3 and some of the people are staying on to kind of get through this. So if we can kind of get to the questions and if you have give a little detail, kind of make the background a little shorter, please.
Okay, I'm serving Vente Perro Bay, represent All of Us or None, and represent myself also with Expo and Just Leadership USA. My question is, how do we get trust from a system that was created to go and catch slaves and bring them back to the slave master? Let me repeat that. How do we gain trust in a system that was originally created to go get the slave and bring them back to the slave master? I believe if we can answer that question and get that established, then we'll be making some headway. So that's my.
Well, I feel like if we can answer that question, we may not have this panel. But for those in law enforcement, if you can take a stab at that question, please.
Hello. Hello, my name is Vincent Perro, and that was my son. It was this.
Okay, before you speak, sir, so was Vente just putting the question out there in the room? Because I need us to have a system so that we can understand what questions and comments will be answered. So now, the father, are you asking a different question and we're not going to answer the previous one?
I'm asking a different question. What it
Okay,
is.
so that question, I guess we're not answering, panel. We're on to this question. Please reintroduce yourself, sir, and thank you for your patience.
I'm about to appeal to you. We don't worry about that question. My son been in the system, and he's still in the system. He has a bracelet on his leg on the case that I didn't understand. The system is, we'll get you and we'll do some things to you. My question is, what do you do for brothers that have bracelets on their legs, and when they get out of prison, they still have a bracelet on their legs? I feel that if you done did the time, why not let a person move on with their life? My son's been on the bracelet for over 20 years. We talking about for a crime that was very stupid. It was about a female, underage. But let me remind you, he was 18, she was 17. In Milwaukee, they called it statutory rape. Am I correct? Okay. What can be did for him in the same token? Like we were speaking on the sister daughter that this was accused of a crime that she really didn't admit. It was a false pretense.
I'll grab that question. So I think this goes back to Representative Brostaff's comment earlier.
Can you
about,
please say who you are for those that are watching live as well?
Ms. Schroeder. I'm the I am the statewide campaign coordinator for Expo, Ex-Incarcerated People Organizing Wisdom and the Rock campaign, which is restoring our communities. So this, I believe your question, Mr. Perro, goes back to a comment that Representative Brostaff made earlier regarding from. And so unfortunately, one of the, and I'm just going to say for the record that I think it was an alarmist. Sometimes we do things with great intentions. You know, when we have bad things happen in our families and we go to legislators and we say, you know what, we need this type of legislation in order to make sure that this never happens to anybody again. And, you know, we do feel good legislation and we name it after, you know, the victim. And we all say, oh, this is so wonderful. And what we're doing, unfortunately, we're putting everybody in a box. And that's what happened with Lifetime GPS in Wisconsin, in my humble opinion. My husband is also on Lifetime GPS, which means that he will wear a monitor and be tracked until the day that he dies. And that's real. And again, I think that what we need is we need for the police, we need for the DA, we need for legislators to all get to the table together and say, let's take a look. Let's look at the research. Let's look at what they're doing in other states and other communities to really keep people safe. Because not everyone who is on GPS in the state of Wisconsin is a threat, right? Is a danger. You have all of these watchdog sites where you can put your address in and see all the little dots of all the people that are, you know, that are a danger to you. No. And that actually makes you less safe. What I want to know is who is actually a threat to me? Who is actually a threat to my grandchildren and to my children? Who? That's what we need to know. And so unfortunately, again, the GPS, the Lifetime GPS in the state of Wisconsin, it came from a place of we don't want this to happen again. And I support that. I do. But I think that right now there's so much scrutiny being placed on people that I can tell you right now there's definitely people that are on GPS for a lifetime in Wisconsin that do not need to be. And they are in a situation like your son is. And it's expensive to the state of Wisconsin. It's expensive to communities where, you know, unfortunately, Chief Norman is sending his officers out to people's houses when they could be actually going to DV or to shots fired or to whatever, but he's sending them to go check on someone whose alarm is going off because they're having a problem, you know, charging their unit or whatever else. It takes away from real law enforcement. And so, again, we just have to kind of get these people to the table and decide what is smart and what is actually going to make our community safer. And I believe, hopefully, that will happen within our lifetime and hopefully within your lifetime.
Thank you very much. And everyone have a blessed
All
day.
right, thank you for that. Do we have any other guests? This will be the last one. What I will ask is that those that do have other questions, I give you my word. Make questions or comments. Make sure that you leave them there, and we are going to send them to whether it is the DA's office or the chief of police, and I'm going to ask them live to the best of their ability. If we send them the list of these questions or comments, will you all give us a reply so that we then can send a reply back to the individual?
Of course.
Okay. This will be the last and final questions. Okay.
My name is Sukaina Bay. I'm here representing the American National Moors of Amexem and the youth. I've noticed that there have been a lot of policy enforcers that violate constitutional and religious rights. And my question is, when are you going to remove or get rid of or retrain or have some type of diversity training for these policy enforcers that keep violating our rights?
All right, thank you. I'll give that question to the chief, asking about policy and training, or in reference to training and policy.
So in regards to just trying to make sure I understand the question, when you say policy enforcers, you mean police officers in regards to, we have a lot of training, but I can say it's always not enough. I think that we have to also rethink about why we have to have this training, who are we hiring, how we can better recruit and have of our curriculum. But at the end of the day, you can train as much as you want, but if someone doesn't embody and understand, that's where the challenges come in. We all talk about implicit bias, and the unfortunate thing is until it becomes explicit, it's hard to know what people are thinking. We can only respond to actions, and I can say this much: I would not tolerate any explicit biases. I will not tolerate anyone who has a disrespect for, again, race, gender, creed, religion. We as public servants is responsible for the all. And again, coming from my place of being a Black man in this resident, I have a level of sensitivity to making sure that happens, because for me to allow without any particular type of intervention, that could be my uncle who lives in Milwaukee. That could be my brother who lives in Milwaukee. That could be my in-laws who live in Milwaukee. It could be my grandmother who lives in Milwaukee. I take that seriously. Mm-hmm. I'm serious.
I'm glad
I have people.
Did it just go off again?
Mm-hmm.
I'll give it a couple seconds. It's been coming back on.
Okay, can I hop on for a quick follow-up on that one, Saquana, too? Or is there...
Absolutely.
Okay,
yep,
cool.
And then we'll close it up.
Okay. You get another buddy joining us.
I know, I will.
Say hi. Say hi, Saquana. He's tired. He got up from his nap a little bit early. Well, actually, he's on time. I'm a little bit late.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
All right. Okay, it went off, so usually it'll pop back in.
Okay. Yeah, and Jeff, I hope you know my comments earlier weren't directed at you, and I saw your kind of visceral response, but I was talking more about the structure of the system in general and the relationships that are.
I understand.
Yeah,
we
right.
do
It's all good.
have a lot of men and women of character on this job, but we do also have issues of people who don't, and that they need to be dealt with in regards to.
Yes, because my niece's religious rights were violated while she was being arrested. She kept telling them that she was Muslim and did not care. Not only that, they searched her illegally. Her being a woman, a female, they lied and told, I don't know if they lied or not, but they said they sent any female cops around, and she asked for a female cop. That's violation. I don't like that. Something needs to be done.
It's a difficult situation because the preferred choice is to have the female officer.
Exactly, and
but
they
if it is
violate
male, you have to have
on
certain
camera.
techniques you do, because sometimes availability might not be there, and the public safety aspect of it, where we have rules of engagement, how officers are supposed to treat, someone who's a female in custody. So definitely, I hear you.
Maybe they need to hire some more female officers, but yeah. I understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate that you're going to do something about it. But as far as, because they're targeting our youth, and our youth is our future, so something has to get done.
I understand now.
That's all I have.
All right, thank you. We went out and we're back in. Was that a different comment or question that's going on?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. I agree with a lot. I couldn't hear everything, but I agree with a lot of what I just heard as far as, from the kind of, my other side, it's just after bedtime and he's ready for snacks, so I got to hop off after this. But yeah, basically, I think that's a good point. That's not just about the training and you got to come in on the front end. And I think that's, that's something that just came up. One of my colleagues, Representative Cabrera, just brought up to me, she just pointed out the fact that in the Journal Sentinel that just reported a West Dallas woman was high on drugs. She repeatedly shot at police officers in Cudahy, and this woman did not have her race mentioned. She was white, but her race wasn't mentioned in that police story. She never mugshot put up in there, didn't have all of her information out like that. And the police officers did not kill her. In fact, they didn't even mortally, they didn't even wound her significantly, even though they had to hide behind their cop cars in order to, dodge her bullets, basically. What happened was, she apparently was really drunk and really high, and they handled the situation without killing her. Again, it's almost more of a slap in the face in a certain sense, because in this situation where if ever there was a justified, shooting where you say, well, they really did have to protect themselves or that. They did not. Okay. And I really got to get going soon. They did not kill her. They, afforded her life. And it shows that this is possible, that the police, it's not just about diversity and equity training and all this other stuff. When it's a white person literally firing at cops, you see this over and over and over again. When it's a person of color, the disparities there. So there is something else going on. There's a fundamental, it's more than just a training. And I think, the police chief really made a good point as far as who's being hired and stuff like that. But I think there's a much larger issue that has to be addressed. And I got to get rolling. All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks. Appreciate you.
No, thank you. And now we're going to turn it back over to all of us, and just stay on for a couple more minutes, you guys. And thank everyone for your questions, your comments. And like I said, if you had a question or comment that we cannot get to today, please make sure someone there receives it, and we'll send it to those individuals and get a reply back for you. Okay. Back to you guys, whether it's Gabby or Khalif.
Thank you, Supervisor Taylor. I appreciate that. Before we close out, our brother Percy had a comment that he wanted to make really quickly.
I just had a question for Chief Norman. Are there officers in the Milwaukee Police Department right now that concern you?
There are situations that's on my radar. Again, being a large department, to say that I know everyone personally will be lying. If there's things I've seen in regards to behaviors, yes. Again, check the history though. I've attempted to fire people. I stood on things in regards, again, it's in the records.
That was my next question.
So my whole thing is, I'm not afraid to fire anybody, brother. I'm not afraid to chop off heads. I'm telling you. I ask people all the time. I have my inspectors, who is the highest ranks, stand next to me. If I got to chop off a head, I will. Because at the end of the day, I mean this. I truly mean this. I have no tolerance for any vindictiveness, any unprofessionalism, any violations of rights. I tell people all the time, if you are accused of those type of behaviors, I start with firing and see how it gets mitigated down. Because at the end of the day, we are all sick of this. There's a lot of people within the department who is sick of this. It's not that we have a unified voice about bad police behaviors. I mean, sometimes because a larger crowd drowns our voices out, but we're not with this. Again, if I thought it was systemic in regards to what my experience, and I can't talk about other departments, all I can talk about MPD, I would not be on this project, my brother. I know people talk about in regards to the history and things like that. I'm very well versed in my history. The Willie Lynch theory, Marcus Garvey, Nat Turner. I know it all. We can talk all day. But at the end of the day, I always ask people, who do you want to be your police officer then? If not me, then who? Because at the end of the day, we do have people out there, well, we have to be honest, that's on something. And we need to have somebody who's willing to be out there to deal with those type of behaviors. So I definitely hear you. I definitely feel all this, and I appreciate being a part of this conversation. I'm only one man.
Respect, which was the second part of my question, which was then what can we as community members, what can I see a district attorney on the call, what can we do to help make your job easier, to help get rid of these problem officers that you see?
When you have information like what you just talked about, it has to be brought to our attention. And there's people above people. I always say this much. I cannot do things that I don't know nothing about. I am down on 7th and State. District is going as far as north to the District 4 to the far south to District 6. We have to stand on it and talk to someone. Every officer has a boss. Every boss has a boss. And when it gets to the right person, because sometimes, yes, we have people who drop the ball. That's just the unfortunate reality of what we got. But believe me, if it comes to my attention, something's going to be handled because I'm not going to tolerate it. And I tell people right to the eyes, I'm looking at you in your eyes. I'm not going to tolerate it. But at the end of the day, we can only work off of what we hear and what we get. So I definitely ask for those information that that's where community engagement is. We have to build trust. I know that right now there's a big emptiness of trust of that basically, and you're going to be heard. Yeah, I see my man.
Yeah, I got you. My bad. Listen, that was it. I'm done. I'm sorry. I'm done.
Well, I want to give a great round of applause to our esteemed panelists. I think this was a very robust, great, necessary discussion. Thank you to all of our esteemed panelists, to our co-moderator, Supervisor Taylor, and to all of the directly impacted and elected officials. Thank you, Chief Norman, for coming out in the flesh. Same thing with everybody else who's on virtual. I appreciate you all, Brother Ryan, Jeff, and Representative Brostoff, and everybody who participated. We apologize for, again, the overage, and we will get those comments and concerns that the community did not get a chance to address to these officials so that we can get a response. So we're going to say all of us a non-chant, and we're going to be heading out of here. I see everybody moving before we start, so I see everybody ready to go. So we want to get this rolling. We do have survey sheets that's coming around, so if you can get those survey sheets and fill them out really quickly, it'll take you about 1 minute. And next month, we have Dr. Umar Johnson on our panel for the School to Prison Pipeline, and we're going to have some real deep conversation about the School to Prison Pipeline and our youth of today, and how we can break the cycle of incarceration. All right, I'm going to hand it over to our esteemed host, Brother Sean Vaughn, our ambassador.
We'd like to thank everyone once again for attending another All of Us Another event. We do want everyone to know that we are we're not heavily funded, and we do ask that we do ask the community to help out with donations. Make sure that we keep things like this on the go. We plan on keeping this going for the rest of the year, where we are addressing different situations within our community. So thank you everyone who attended, and we are going to close the event with one of our chants. All of us.